Okay, hey everybody. My name's Dwayne Karen, and I'd like to welcome you to Node Nerds today. Joining us on the screen is Angela ZIE, Ava Birch, and Kat Fair. How are you guys today?
We're
Awesome.
great. How are
Excellent.
you?
Doing well, doing well. So
Good.
today on Node Nerds, we're going to talk about customer intake because a lot of us, especially on the Node Nerds, do quilt for other customers, quilt for customers, right? So, and everybody has a little bit different process on how we intake our customers. So, what do you guys think is the most important thing to get started with? Like when you're getting started to take a customer's quilt in.
I'm going to say communication. Definitely talking with the client. Do they have a budget? Who is the quilt for? Sometimes it'll be a pink quilt, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to a girl, or maybe they don't want hearts and flowers. You never know. So just definitely a lot of communication, especially like picking out patterns and how dense they need to be, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and I agree with that. But to start out with, it's definitely you have to have a form, and the form, kind of gives you some guidance as to what is important, because not only do you want to communicate with the client, but you also want to be sure that you take notes. And most and foremost, I think, is that at the end of your consultation, that you will have them review what you discussed. And then, if possible, unless they're mailing the quilt to you, that you're going to have them sign it, because that way it protects you as well as them. Um, I've become a little bit lax when it comes to that advice, because I've had many of my clients for a really long time. However, the communication part that hasn't really changed. And, we often hear, well, you're the professional, you decide what you're going to put on this quilt. And that may work well for somebody I've been working with for a really long time. However, if it's a new to me client, that won't fly. I will give them more options because, as Kat mentioned, the use of the quilt and all of those things, I know nothing about you, but your likes and dislikes are. And my taste, can very much be different from theirs. So I will overcompensate initially and spend extra time, you know, getting to know and show examples, whether it's, in Creative Studio, going through patterns, or other examples that of pictures of quilts I've done, because most of the time they know nothing about quilting, finishing the quilt. Their love is the piecing. So communication truly is the key.
I totally agree, Ava, because I'm the same though. I think I got a little bit lax because I have a lot of the same customers, but at the beginning I had a formal intake form and made sure that there was sign off, and now I've kind of moved to just a notebook. However, I will get them to review it before they leave. Same way, just that states like the thread color that they picked and the pattern that we chose, and for that reason, just to protect them and myself in case they get it back and it wasn't quite what they thought it was going to look like. But I mean, that was the pattern that was chosen, and often because we can show them in Creative Studio, we can mock it up. They get a good sense, so that we don't run into that too often, but it's just nice to have that security blanket for sure in
Wait,
case.
so you guys actually have them sign? I've never done that. Do you have them signed, Elaine?
Not very often, no, no. But we don't and probably should, but we've really not had an issue so far with that. Like people being bitterly disappointed.
Yeah, yeah. And Kat, like, I don't get them to sign as much anymore. Like I'm like Ava, so I got a little bit lax. But at the beginning, I think I was so nervous. And when I was taking in customer quilts, and I was like, oh my gosh, they're entrusting me with their tops and their things. And like I just wanted to make sure everything was perfect and professional looking. And I'm not saying that I'm not professional anymore. It's just that you get like you just get used to certain people and you know their likes and all that. And so it's just, yeah, I just jot it down.
Yeah, so we absolutely have an intake form that we make notes on, right? And it just has, thread color, thread type, backing, whether it's customer supplied or not, binding, whether we're binding it or not binding it. The backing is the backing directional because a lot of times you're looking at that, like you can see it all when they're there, but you get busy when you start quilting and maybe not realize that backing is directional, and needs to be loaded one way or in one direction, just stuff like that. Just the more notes that you can make, the better.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially the tops, what they want their top to be versus the bottom. So sometimes like it's all the same block, right? But maybe it's, they've done some kind of ombre thing with a bunch of different colors and they're moving in. And so I'll always take a look at that and say, okay, what is your visual top for that? Do you want to start with the light on the top or the dark on the top or things like that? So that, yeah,
That's a really good point. I put a little clippy
yeah,
in the top with a sticky note that says top left corner so that I know. Because, yep, a lot of times you can't tell. Like you said, is
yeah.
when you're
It's not
staring
so
at the
bad. A lot of
fabric.
our patterns, yeah, it's not so bad because a lot of our patterns aren't necessarily directional, but especially with the ones that like
Mm-hmm.
they look different, whether it's, flipped or not, you're definitely going to want to get
Yeah.
them
Just like
identified.
ABC. You don't want those letters to be sideways for sure.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
So do you meet clients at your house or do you meet them at a quilt shop or both?
I meet mine at my house.
Ditto.
They come, well, unless they're mailing it in, but I feel comfortable them coming in and that way I can take a look at the quilt, make sure it's not a hot mess in regards to how it was pieced or pressed. But that also gives me an option to for an edge to edge to do a mock-up. I just feel more comfortable. They can make the choices with the thread. I can spool out all the threads. I used to meet at my previous location, meet them at quilt shops, and I had them send me a picture of the quilt, and I would bring various spools of thread still, or at the time, as I was using pantographs, have a whole bundle of I mean, it was a nightmare.
Yeah,
But I still wanted them to have a good experience, even though they did. So I prefer for them to come to the house.
yeah,
I can't
yeah,
imagine having to haul all that stuff. Like at least now you can just bring your laptop if you had to meet them someplace.
There's
But my
that.
goodness.
right.
But thread too, though, that's a good point. It's harder
Yeah.
to show them thread colors like at a quilt shop or whatever.
I think it kind of depends on the level of your customer, if she's new, I say she, if they're new, maybe they don't know. They don't know and they'll trust you to make a choice, The one thing I like about quilt shops is like if when you're starting your business that if you carry a quilt into a quilt shop, they have to see it, right? So if it's a nice quilt and you've done a nice job on it, that's kind of like free advertising for you. Word gets around because believe it or not, quilters talk to one another. And so word gets around, right? So it's kind of like free advertising too. Um,
Well,
I never thought of that.
depends too, though, because in my area, there's a couple quilt shops, one less than a mile away from my house. I've never set foot in it. I've lived here 3 years now because they sell a different brand of machine and they use that machine to do their quilting. And yeah, so I choose not to meet customers there. I could look at it from the other direction, but no, can't do it.
Yeah, plus a store that sells machines, if they are quilting for their own customers, probably wouldn't want you to meet them in there anyway.
Right.
You know, like I know one of our coworkers, Kayla, meets people at the library.
Yep.
A neutral place. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I'll do
Yeah.
that for clients that I've quilted for a long time that are like, yeah, do what you want. And I kind of know their preferences. I'll meet at like the Home Depot parking lot or Starbucks, and they'll just hand me the quilt and we'll chit chat about it. And then I'll meet them there when it's done, and give it back to them that way. It's all nice and neatly and folded in a bag and whatnot. But otherwise, I prefer to have them come to the house, especially if it's my first time quilting for you. You're coming to my house. Sorry,
Yeah.
you are. And then, because like you said, otherwise, there's no way to know their preferences. And I like to spool out the thread like Ava does. And if it's custom, we go through like, okay, well, do you like feathers? Do you like the blah, 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 all the things. And I write it all down on my intake form with lots of notes and sometimes little diagrams for myself because otherwise I will forget. So that can take a while, but I don't charge for that because I think it's like customer service.
Yep, it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, I meet them at my house too, for the most part. I have, though, Kat, you brought up a good point about being able to take our laptop for our patterns. I have had some customers that have had some mobility issues, so I will go to them
Mhm.
if they're close by, and that's a really great option. If they can't get out of their house or whatever, I have met them at their house and brought my laptop, and you can show patterns. And thread is a little bit more complicated, but generally you can take a look at the quilt and say, okay, would you like a light blue or a dark blue, and then I will match as close to possible. That looks nice. Once I'm home, I don't bother to take out my threads, but yeah.
Yeah, one nice feature about Creative Studio is that, like Ava alluded to, that you can do a mock-up of the
Mhm.
quilting over top of an image of the quilt, right? You
Yeah.
know, so they can just physically see that. The other thing about that is you can see whether it's like too dense or too loose, or this pattern's not going to work at all, on this particular quilt. So that's a very, very nice feature. So when you take after you take their quilt in, then what's the process? How do you guys store that? What do you do with the quilt after you've taken it in?
Well, I generally don't store quilts at my house. I have a system as to where, well, they have their date, or they know their date is coming up next week, and then I reach out to them and we set a date. And then the quilt will be quilted, especially if it's an edge to edge. And the same for custom quilts. I always require that they send me an image of the quilt prior so I can do some prep work. In my case, my custom quilting generally consists of a combination of hand-guided and computerized on every custom quilt. So I will mock up, something for them. And the reason why I started doing that, because I ran into quite some time ago into trouble where they had an appointment to come and it was a custom quilt and it was early in the morning. I wasn't having a great day for whatever reason. I couldn't think of a darn thing. And I was super mortified, because that certainly is not professional. So I realized that if I can do the mock-up or preparation ahead of time, it works well for them because they get to see different options and I don't look like a moron and non-creative person. So, I can show them and it goes really well. So I generally don't store quilts, maybe for a couple days, and I have a plastic tub. that it goes into with the intake form in case something happens to me and nobody knows whose quilt that is. So
Yeah, that's a very good point, Ava.
I'm
I
glad you said that.
Yeah, I actually now I feel like, oh gosh, maybe I need to go add some numbers to my my quilts
Yep.
downstairs because I do take in a few at a time. I just because if customers can come during my schedule to drop it off, then I let them do that even if I'm not gonna kind of get to it for a week or 2 weeks. Especially with traveling recently. I want to be able to have it here as soon as I'm ready to go back and get at it. But no, I didn't think of putting like a numbering system so that my family would know who to give them back to. Oh God. I know it's a bit of a morbid thought, but I mean, crazier
no,
things
I'm
but
have
so
happened,
paranoid
right?
about it.
I am.
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
Especially
God.
if I go on a trip. I always think plane crash,
Yeah.
car
Yeah,
accident.
Yeah.
totally. Bus crash, whatever. Like, I'm
You know
always
I'm an
concerned about
overthinker,
that.
so there it goes beyond just
Uh-huh.
Wow. That's really good. Yeah.
Totally. I mean, I don't, sometimes I'll just put like, if it's someone I quote for a lot, like phone number on file, because my
Mm,
husband has the password to my phone. So hopefully he would put two and two together and look them up, you know?
right.
Um, but like Ava, I started putting them just like in clear plastic bags, and now I have switched to the tote method as well. It's just easier to stack them. They go in the studio. So my studio has like multiple rooms. So the second room has a bathroom with a closet off of it. So they go all the way in there in the tub on a shelf, high enough up that if there's any chance the dogs would get into there, which it's all gated off, but just in case, they're also in a plastic tub. I'm also paranoid that even though there's no water pipes above there, that somehow there's going to be a water leak and everything in my closet is going to be ruined. I may be a little crazy. So that's why they're in the plastic totes too. So if water came pouring down out of my ceiling for some reason, they're protected. The intake forms are in there. So family would know who to call if need be. And then I have a whiteboard outside of the closet with their names on it. So it'll say like Julie A, and it's a baby quilt. And then Julie B is a Christmas quilt, blah, blah, blah. And whether it's edge to edge, custom, or a combination, so that I could quickly go in and go, okay, who is next? Da, 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 to try to estimate my turnaround time.
Yeah. So you guys are making me really feel like I need to like um fix up my system for all the doomsday things that go through your mind because I literally just I have like nice big hangers, you know, like the comforter hangers with the thicker, and then I just because they usually come all pressed and everything, so I just hang them over there and I hang them in order that I get them in because I'm kind of a first in first out person. I like to kind of go in order. And so I just hang them, but I don't have them in plastic or covered or for any kind of water thing. So now I think maybe
Angela.
Not
I
only that,
know,
Ange,
I know.
but
Gosh.
I
But
also
if
live in
you,
a wildfire area. So with them being in
Okay.
totes, it's easier for me if I have to evacuate. I can grab the totes and shove them in the car, shove the dogs in the car on top of the totes. I don't have to worry about the quilts.
Right.
but
Right.
if you cover them in plastic on your hangers, you can pretend you be a dry cleaner, Angela, and
Yeah.
clip the intake form
Form
and
to it.
your
Yeah.
rack.
Yeah. I do tape the intake. Like I do
Wait,
tape the
wait, now
notes.
you need a motorized rack too.
Dwayne, how do you do it? I'm feeling like I'm a slacker here now, but
No, so actually we take the quilts like after the customer leaves, we have the work order filled out. So we use an old program called Quilter's Business Manager,
Yep.
QBM, and it works really well. But also in that, and it you can kind of print them up and invoice, like um, an estimate of the cost of the quilt on there, but also you can import a picture of it. So we take a picture of every quilt when we take it in, and you can import that picture into Quilter's Business Manager. So that can go in there, the work order goes in it, and then we slip it into a plastic bag with the work order, with the top, the back, the work order, and the invoice all goes into a plastic bag. And then it goes in a tubby and it goes on a shelf, on a wire rack, like a bread rack. And so that's just our process, because that's just what we did from the very beginning. Like, we were super cautious that, because you don't know when you're getting started, you really just don't know how this is even gonna work, right? So that's the way we've always done it, and it seems to work out good. Jan has a comfort level of my wife has a comfort level, how many quilts that she wants to keep in the house, maybe a dozen or something like that, but no more than that, not 50 or anything like
Yeah.
that, maybe just a dozen or so. And so they go on the shelf, so that keeps her anxiety level down, and the process keep it, the process works. That's what I like about it.
How do you keep track of which ones are next? Like, are they on the shelf in a certain order?
Oh, she has a whiteboard.
A whiteboard like I
She's
do.
a whiteboard, so she's an RN. So there's always a chart, right?
Always a chart. I love it.
Yeah, I have a calendar. I guess it's kind of the same concept. I have a calendar hanging in my workshop area, and then I just slot them in so I know this is what I'm gonna do this day, then that, and that's usually in order.
Wait, sorry, I can't stop thinking about Jan in the chart. Like, you know how there's like pain level from 1 to 10 or whatever, like quilting difficulty from 1 to 10, and that's where the price is. Oh, Jan.
You're stuck on that, Kat, and I am thinking that we need to wrap up this episode so I can go buy a plastic bag.
Totes. Do some little prep work. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh goodness.
Oh, man.
Off and on, you can find the plastic bags at the dollar store. So
Perfect. Guess
yeah,
where I'm going.
the extra large ones. We'll throw
Yeah.
the quilt top in the back.
I use the clear recycle bags. Like, it looks like a trash bag, but it's clear. So I use those because they're huge. So then when the quilt is done, I fold it up nice and pretty and put it in there. So when I hand it back to them, whether I'm meeting them or they come in, it's like protected. And then obviously I open up the quilt and show that to them if they're picking up at my house. But when I'm done with that, it goes back in the bag so they can put it in their car and it's like clean and whatnot.
So any other tips that you guys have for customer intake?
Um, not this doesn't pertain to intake as much, except for when I'm talking to my customer when they come in. And Kat was talking and alluded to all those questions that you need to ask. You have common questions. What the quilt is for, what's intended, especially if it's custom quilting, right? If this is just a custom quilt for them and not a show quilt, you might be able to offer different options that aren't as costly. But even edge to edge, I'll try and get a sense of their budget. And so all my patterns are kind of organized and I've tagged them with the price. So if they say that they want something less dense, I will look up my cheapest patterns based on the price in my tags and just show them those. So that, and then if they want dense, then those are tagged at a different price. And so I can just call up those, and it's just quick when your customer comes in to give the different options. Um, just
That
a
is genius.
little
Very
suggestion.
interesting, because apparently we all do things differently.
Mhm.
As you know, I work from home. So if I have an edge to edge, I let them choose whatever, I ask about the style that they're looking for and I show it to them. And it really doesn't matter to me how long it's going to take to stitch out because I'm doing other things. And so I don't differentiate in price whatsoever. I know that works for me and my customers are happy. If I didn't have full-time job other than quilting, I might definitely consider what Angela is suggesting if that's my only way of making my income. So, my customers are happy because I know they a lot of times get a bargain in regards to intricate patterns or, that literally take a bobbin and a half
Yeah.
for, a row
Yeah.
for the same price than a ginormous meander if I was to do those. So it's interesting.
And I think I started differentiating Ava more from not necessarily time, but I don't charge separately for thread. So that's the way I can
Oh.
recoup some of my thread costs. So I don't like my edge to edge price includes thread. So that's why
Mhm.
I have a varying density price
Okay,
list.
makes
Yeah. So
sense.
that yeah.
That's interesting.
Mhm.
Do you take advantage of the pattern cloud? Like, if you're part of the Business Accelerate program and the pattern cloud, you can put patterns in there and then show that to your clients through the pattern cloud. Do you do that?
I mostly show them through Creative Studio, to
Okay.
be honest, because I've just tagged them so that I can
Oh,
find them. And so you can call them up, of course, the same way in Pattern Cloud, but usually I've just got Creative Studio open instead of logging into something else, to be honest. But no, absolutely. I know that there's like, especially if you've got mail-in, I think, mail-in quilts, that'll allow you to create a catalog in some ways, Kat,
yeah,
to
it
be
does.
able for them to be able to see it visually and pick it from a distance. That's super helpful.
Yeah, because you can just send them the link to like your page on the pattern cloud, if you will, and it'll show them however you have them categorized.
And that's
Yeah.
specifically in the Accelerate program, correct?
Yeah, so if you purchase the Accelerate program, that is part of that you get that option in the pattern cloud.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you
Okay.
have to purchase that first, and then that option opens up for you in the cloud.
Oh, cool. That's
Yeah,
cool.
it's really neat.
Yeah.
So we'll put a link in the bottom to the Accelerate program if anybody wants to check that out then. So when you buy a pattern, like if you buy a specific pattern from the pattern cloud or somewhere else, preferably the pattern cloud, right?
Of course.
And how do you charge for that? Do you charge the customer for the price of that pattern, or do you split it with them, or how do you guys normally do that?
That's a good question. And I think we talked about that in the previous episode, but I wasn't on that episode. Um, I used to like split it, but now I just absorb the cost because I'll probably use it for another quote later on.
Well, um, I generally don't charge them either for an edge to edge design, especially if I think I'm going to be able to use it multiple times. However, I had one client, she literally, with all my options, she was one that likes to look on the internet, right?
Mhm.
And so for 3 quilts in a row, she wanted me to buy the pattern. And I was able to show her, and I did buy the first 2 patterns that she wanted me to get. And I thought, dang,
It adds
these
up
edge
fast.
Yeah.
quilts are supposed to be my bread and butter. Well, where's the butter? But but so she did it again for a third time, and I was able, luckily, to find a pattern that was nearly identical of one that I had. But I think it's an interesting question because I know there is people that quilt for others, let's say a Judy Niemeyer quilt, right? And there's special design collections available. And those are running approximately $150,
Ooh.
right? And so if I only do one Judy Niemeyer quilt in my lifetime, that particular pattern, I certainly don't want to, absorb that
Mhm.
cost.
Yeah.
So I think that's where it becomes tricky. And if I do a lot of those, I may want to split it with them, because get real, if you make them buy it, they get nothing out of it other than that, they get those designs added to their quilt. So what do you think about those scenarios?
So I like you, Ava, I generally absorb because it's usually going to be something I can use again. So I don't mind, and it builds my arsenal. Gives me a reason to buy, right? But for things like that, if I was buying for a specific quilt and it had like specific patterns, um I don't know what I would do there. I think, it would I would weigh whether, because I charge for design time, if I have to create my own patterns in order to fit their space, right? So it actually might be cheaper for them to buy the pre-made for me to buy the pre-made patterns and just put it into the price than my hourly wage to like create all individual patterns that way. So I would probably explain those options for them, but I would probably build it into the price, especially if it's a one shot deal. Yeah.
What do you and Jan do?
We usually split the cost. We'll split the cost of a pattern because we've got, I don't know, 2,000 patterns maybe or something on the machine, and there's probably 600 edge to edge patterns. And if they can't find a pattern out of those 600, and they would like something different, and we find something that's specifically nice for them, we'll split the cost with them. I mean, I think that's fair. Usually, generally like an edge to edge patterns, $15 or something like that. So you're only charging them $7.50. So in the grand scheme of things, it might only be, a couple percent of the total cost of the quilt, right?
Yeah. I didn't realize that those like big packaged ones were like $100 a set. I hadn't thought about that.
150, yeah.
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 That's a lot to absorb. I wouldn't be able to absorb that either.
And sometimes I look at them and I go, oh, okay, so what is this? These are point to points. These are, that's something I'll be able to use again.
True.
So, maybe I would split then, because I'd be like, well, it's not something that I would just put on this quilt, but if it's like an odd shape that is just for, well, like the beautiful quilt behind you, Ava, I'm sure those were all, specific to.
There was a design package, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So those don't look like point to points. So those are all individual for the leaves. So I would probably, I would charge differently. Yeah. But
yeah, you're not using those leaf shapes in like a random paper piece.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's great. That's a bunch of great thoughts on customers and customer intake and how we run our businesses. So any final thoughts from you
Have
guys?
fun, communicate, breathe.
Breathe.
Yeah. And whatever works for you. Like
Yeah.
there's 4 of us here, and I think we all do something a little bit different, and nothing is wrong, right? So whatever works for you and your business, for sure. And your customers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, that's a great place to wrap it up for today. Well, I want to thank everybody, and I want to thank everybody for joining Node Nerds today. And we really appreciate you showing up. And I will see you next time. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.